Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 161 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to upgrade our ore sorting setup to start using crystal catalysts for more efficient ore production. Enjoy! Well, while we're waiting for these resources to get here, we can kind of try to plan what we're going to do with these ore sorting machines. Because we have a certain amount of space here, so we might as well use it. So when we upgrade the better sorting machines, they will go faster. Naturally. But what that means is we have more overhead for productivity modules before they will slow down. So we need to be able to do 60 items a second out while taking up this footprint and no more. And it does 64 per second, so it's a little faster than it should be, but that makes sense because it's never completely perfect for what you want to do. But we have 16 machines to work with. So let's just do a hell mod here, just to see what these numbers are going to do. So we have 16 to work with, and we could compute by factory, but actually computed by element should work just fine. We want 60 per second, and we know that we need to have no more than 16 ore sorting facilities. So we're at 15 here. Of course, we can upgrade to tier 2. Which lowers it to 10. And now we have 3 module slots to work with. And definitely want to use the productivity modules here, because reducing the ore consumption will allow other processes to use it. So it'll give the ore bus more flexibility. So we do 1, we do 2. Now 2 makes it so we have more than 16, so we'll see if we can make up for it with a speed module. And we can. So it's kind of where we're at here, where suddenly it becomes too fast. But they'll take up a little bit less space now. That's kind of interesting that our output is the same, but instead of needing about 15 machines, or let's say 16, so we're rounding, now we'll need 12 if we're rounding. So that should give us a little bit of extra space to work with, which is always nice. Come on, where are those last resources? There it is. Wow, that's still way up there. The convoy of circuit boards. So that's got a way to go still. Well, I might be able to do a little bit of cleanup. Alright, that research is done. We'll just leave it for now, since hopefully that cleared it up good enough that to hold it off until we've got this sorting upgraded. But we're no longer consuming rubite in this way. It's just going to the train. So that means we can pick up this whole long line and recapture all of these belts. And we'll just leave the nub kind of connected here. And we can also recover botmonium. Excellent. The convoy's almost here. Okay, let's see how this works. Oops. We, of course, need an inserter getting the resources in there as well. Seems like it's working pretty good. Gonna need to let it run a little bit, but for now we can grab what appears to be the 12 we're going to need for the basic upgrade pattern here. Okay. Let's see what we can do with this. We just need to upgrade the machines here. So now they take up less space. And they need the 2 productivity modules and a speed module, which we can set up with module inserter here. Productivity, productivity, and speed. And we want to eyeball this belt and make sure the inserters are enough. But they don't really seem to be. The machines are all running. It says we're getting 69 per second. Nice. But in this situation, it looks like it's not quite maxing out the belt. And then maybe with a whole bunch of stack inserters on the last machine. 4 of them. It seems like that's just enough to max it out. But otherwise, the setup doesn't need to be changed. It just works like it should. So now we need to upgrade the other machines. And probably the easiest way to do this is to pick up all of the inserters and copy everything in there and slam it into the new one. And that's been upgraded in place. So now it's just the same process for these other 2. And yes, we cannot forget about the all-important modules. And now we have the line for making manganese, but this is more of a byproduct, so it's okay for this to be empty, but nonetheless, if we are creating manganese, this is the best place to do it. So using these machines in place here, which is working on the ferrous and cupric mixtures, should work just fine. We just need to upgrade it. And the ratio might be different here. So let's just go in here and do some ferrous sorting and see what we can accomplish. Where the input is 30 per second. So we only need 5 machines, but we have room for 8. So productivity, productivity, and then speed. So we need a total of 7 of them. Seems like this is a little more forgiving in the numbers. Plus, it doesn't have to be super fast because it's not the primary output. So it is not often going to be running at full speed anyway. So that seems pretty good. So we'll pick up the inserters from the opposing side. Copy this one. And then we can flip it. And that one seems good. Now with this next one, it's lined up with nickel and silicon. And now we're getting into the processing of chunks. But they fit best right here because we want the output to go straight into the warehouse. Like this. If it doesn't do this, and it instead gets sorted on the bus, then that's 2 whole belts of resources on an 8-lane bus here. That's going to be like over here on the left somewhere and clogging it all up. So you definitely want the primary method of producing it to go directly into the warehouse with a bypass that goes underneath everything. So they need to be here, and these set of 6 groups of machines are all handling the crushed ores. And they should probably stay together as a group since they're all the same thing. We should probably pick them up as a group and then drop them back down as a group somewhere else. Because we definitely want to make sure to pick up all of their logic, because that applies. But we don't necessarily need to pick up their warehouses because that's not going to be there anymore. And we'll worry about the bus and sorting the ores when it becomes relevant. So we can pick that up just so we have it saved. And we'll have to remember that we're placing it back down somewhere else. And now we can go line by line here and figure out the nickel. Well, right out of the gate, it's not going to be doing it from crushed ores anymore. And we will have to calculate this logic as required, but we probably want to set all the machines down first so we can see it as a whole, and then we'll have to do something like this for the chunks. But the numbers are basically going to be the same, so we can pick everything up and copy it over from, let's say, iron. This used to be the best method at 8,000, and we'll probably want to set that now to 10,000, so it supersedes the other methods. And all of this other logic is no longer required because that one set point is all we need. So a lot of this can be picked up and moved, and even this sorting can be moved. It's not necessary anymore. And we can control this with both sides. And we don't need the green wire anymore. But we'll just pick up all of this. Move it over. Looks like we can't quite drop it down because underground belts. And that'll require some inputs, but we'll have to have the warehouses set up and the logic. So I should probably leave those power poles in place so they can connect. You can see that silicon is just inching along at the minimum size the train is allowed to run at 1/4 size. Because crystal production is still occurring. The train isn't running anymore, but we're backing up on things. And actually it looks like we are just backing up on things, which is nice to see. So we can see what the steady state of this is. Looks like we're still not crushing any crystals, but they're all being used well enough. And the farm is farming. Although I noticed there's some seeds that are sitting on a belt here, which means they're not being used. So let's go up there real fast and connect the rest of the farms. At this point, micromanaging the farms and hooking them up one at a time probably isn't worth it anymore, since a lot of the machines are greedily holding on to their 10 seeds at a time, even if they don't need it, because of the way that Factorio machines hold on to slightly more resources than they need. So when you have a very rare, valuable resource, it is unfortunately unusable. And you can kind of get away from that when you have a small number of machines, just by how you build them. But once you have a long line of them, the machine in the front is just going to get filled up every time, and then the one behind it is going to get filled up every time. So once you get to that point, you might as well just hook them all up in sequence and let the process happen as it will. And kind of like with gardens, it's a similar situation where, yeah, we could use inventory sensor to minimize the amount of seeds that each machine picks up. But is it really worth it? Probably not. But I don't know. It might be worth trying it out since it hasn't been done before on this factory. You never know how well something's going to work unless you give it a shot. So we have lots of inventory sensors here. Now these are picking up both mud and seeds. Because it takes room for combinators and whatnot, inventory sensors is the kind of thing where, yeah, you really want to do it before you build the setup, so you have lots of room. Because yes, we can turn this inserter off if inventory sensor says we have enough seeds, but what about mud? Although mud is first, I don't know how inserters work. I kind of want to test it. If they're low on two different resources, which one do they fill up on first? So we'll put the inventory sensor there, just go right across the farm, and we'll say the enabled condition is this seed. I'm not sure how it works if the current item that's being crafted counts, but let's just say less than 1. And alright, so it picks up the mud first, so we actually can use one sensor just because of how this works. And it does count the crafting item. So we'll say less than 5. So it just fills up to the 5 and then stops. Yeah, it's a little problematic. It needs to fill up at least one set for the process to run, so even doing this, it's still going to have an extra 5 seeds in it. But that will cut down the number of seeds that each machine holds onto by half if we do that. And honestly, that seems pretty worth it. Especially since it's a fairly compact system here that just uses one square and nothing else. You can see by doing that, a bunch of seeds are starting to collect because they're not being hogged by the machines anymore. So we can connect all of that. And how are the crystals? They filled up. So we have at least 1,000 of each type. So it's no longer running. And everything's kind of just filling up here. I think I'll still let this run for a little bit and overfill, because we definitely want to make seeds. Actually, we might be able to get a tiny bit more time out of this by sending the train back for one more pickup. So it's going to come in there, fill up on red crystals, do a little bit more growing. And yeah, I'll leave this connected, let it keep running until it completely clogs the entire system, so we make the maximum amount of seeds first. And we'll need to change the logic, because right now the logic is giving it a preference to nutrient pulp from this farm setup than actually from the byproducts from this process here, making vegetable oil. So we actually want to consume this first, but we've inverted that priority right now, just so we can make as many seeds as possible. But it's really getting to the point now of fairly exponential growth, so probably doesn't have too much longer before it's caught up. I'm kind of surprised the silicon powder held out as long as it did to let that process complete. But it definitely won't hold out for blue science. So we gotta fix that. Plus our concrete growth has been quite slow since it was disconnected, since a lot of silicon goes into that. But if we're infinitely generating silicon again, then we can start laying down concrete. And in fact, I kind of want to start doing refined concrete, just because, why not? And the more regular concrete we lay, that's more refined concrete that will have to replace it. And refined concrete takes twice as much stone as regular concrete does. So it's not something you want to mess with unless you think you have a ton of extra stone. And we're kind of getting to that point now. We got to get this sorting thing here all set up. So we can copy something from over here, line it up with the relevant parts. Then those settings are a little wrong, so it's putting the wrong resource in here. We got to set this to nickel. Set for silicon. And then the next resource storage warehouse area is blank. Now we have a couple different choices about what to put here, but the thing that makes the most sense are the crushed ore sorting. Let's say we did the crushed sapphirite ore sorting near the end. Well, that's just more iron and copper that has to travel down past warehouses and sorting buses that it will never produce resources to ever go through. So for example, why pass all this through the zinc warehouse over here when it's never going to have any zinc in it? It's just extra resources on these belts that don't need to be there. So now that we've taken care of all of the resources that can be produced from the crushed ores, now it's time to just put the rest of the crushed ores in there and have them go down into their relevant warehouses. Which means that the rest of this needs to get picked up and moved as well. So this setup here is for all of the crushed ores, so we should probably do this one here. And we can just pick up the remainder of what's left. And we'll probably need to adjust it again, so this won't necessarily be the final output of all of this, but now we want to include the warehouses in this because they're getting moved as well. So now we have quite a bit of work in front of us to get this to slot in properly. But we've got 3 whole sets of these that we've got to make room from. And we got to unhook all of the inputs. Just pick all this up because there's going to be undergrounds in there. And we got all of this other sorting logic to take care of. We'll see how it lines up, but the more we take out, the the more likely it's going to fit when everything's said and done. And hopefully that's everything. I mean, it basically is everything, but I should say, hopefully it fits. Let's see here. Well, we don't need these ones right there, which will make that a little smaller. Let's see. Some of those power poles don't seem to be in the same spots. Let's just remove all of them. So that fits in there. We'll have to readjust it as required. Actually, I just noticed that everything is going the wrong way. That might have explained why some of those power poles weren't fitting. Because they were reversed. We got it flipped the right way now. Okay, mostly set up here. We need to make sure all of this other logic wasn't broken. So the logic wires come down and in there. Belts need to go in or is being pulled into the associated warehouse. All the logic copied down. Now we just have a very large quantity of resources in warehouses which have to move. We'll leave these belts just kind of sitting here for now, knowing that they have to be reconnected. And the zinc warehouse has to move too. In that sense, I'm going to disconnect the outputs of these other resources, because this is going to mess up the logic when this is all unhooked. So we don't want it clogging things up. But these splitters don't need any logic on them. They're just inserting their ore onto the bus. All the logic is here, and clearly some of the logic is hooked up because we're getting some lights. So now we need to set this up. We'll do another line again, just to see if this basic type of sorting is any different. We're going to compute by input, because we know we have one belt of input. So we have 5 machines. Let's start throwing the productivities in there. We have the room for 8 machines. And it's kind of the same as everything else. 2 and 1. Which means we need 7. Then we can leave all these in the order that they're producing things, because that's how all the logic was set up. So we don't want to change any of that. And now that that's taken care of, we can go back into producing our primary ores again, which are aluminum, zinc, and silver. And the primary way to make all of those is with our new catalyst sorting. So they just need to go on the end here, and now we're going to start extending past where this belt is. And it probably makes the most sense to just move it. It's a little frustrating in that sense, but somewhat unavoidable based on its position. So we can just sort of chop it up and get everything else lined up after the fact. I have the feeling in testing there will inevitably be belts that were not connected, requiring lots of testing and running to find all of the random belts that aren't hooked up. Okay, we've got a space cleared out. Gotta scroll through and find the necessary thing. It looks like it's this one. And do number 1, number 2, and number 3. One advantage of using less machines is now there's more room for these crystal catalysts to make it through. Now we gotta get this configured. It doesn't have to be in any particular order, so might as well just do aluminum, zinc, and silver. And we previously had 3 methods, which means if this is method number 4 and it's the best, then it would be 8,000. With zinc, we had 2 methods. So this is method number 3 at 6,000. And with silver, we had 3 methods. So this is method number 4 at 8,000. And we got to get all these sorting filters correct for resources that come from further down the line that need to get sent into the correct warehouse. And we got to reattach their logics, which we can do with something like this. And they have to be reconfigured for each ore type. Okay, all that stuff is set. The resources should be back on the wire here, but I kind of want to set the alarm off using our little system to make sure that it works. Well, the alarm isn't going off. It's because it's greater than, not equal or greater, so if we do 95, there we go. Let's apply that signal to all of them. Zinc. Okay, it had to change for a second. Wait for the flashing to go away. Silver. Okay. So those are all set. Signals are back on the network. And these are set. So then we look at what we picked up here. This is basically the last elements just with some extra bits on top. But we have the 6 columns doing the chunk sorting. And then this column here for the powder sorting. There's nothing wrong with them staying in this order. It'll work just fine. Of course, the only problem is the road. So it looks like one will fit there. So let's place this down. And then just grab what we need. So we'll want to do this sorting right here. We'll just place what we can in there and remove all of these extra belts that have to be shuffled around. So we'll set this to ferrous powder, cupric powder on the left. These should be all of the same settings. And this may not be enough belts anymore as far as slag is concerned, but we'll have to give it a shot. Because if all of the inefficient methods are running at the same time, then there may not be enough room on 4 belts here. Because it's kind of designed to have 3 here, and then the 4th comes in, and then they combine to 3. So I don't really want to use that last slot down there, because I think it's necessary. Then we've got a road we have to jump over. Could move the road, but it's already there, and it's already straight, so I'm okay with making a gap. Let's see, let's just clear this entire forest. Then the last stuff we have to take care of, or all of the chunk sorting. Which are these last machines? We want to take all of the logic, and potentially some of the sorters, but we could also make those pretty easily. And then we need to drop this in here. Probably want to leave some extra space because it looks like the sorter kind of extends past the machines a little bit, so. Well, that's definitely not lined up. There we go. We don't really have any concrete bricks anymore, so we can't make the rest of these machines, unfortunately. So let's make what we can. And let's change out the belts. That will be different. We can copy what we got going on elsewhere. Okay, we can pull a lot of that out. And just copy it over here because it's easier. Be nice to have a larger warehouse for this purpose of dumping things in there. I'll wait on putting modules in this side just because it's not completed. I want to remember to do them all at the same time. But we've got what we could connected in there. So now it's time to make sure that all of this stuff can interface with each other. Because a lot did get changed. We've got to run the signal wire down that has the contents of all the ores, and I think that's where it's supposed to go for the crystallizers to work properly. And the signal does need to continue to get the logic over here. Well, the lights are all some red, some green, which tells me it's probably hooked up properly. So that crosses the gap. We can actually put it to the test by grabbing some of these extra resources here. I don't know if that's every ore type in there, but it doesn't have to be. It's just a rough way of seeing if this works. So if so, all of these ores should be able to make it back to where they're supposed to go. If this worked correctly, there should be no extra ores in any of these warehouses. It looks pretty good, and there shouldn't be any ores down here. But there are. It's possible that's a result of previous operations fixing things up and just the wrong ores making it down, but nonetheless, that implies that it's not set up correctly, because it's not supposed to work that way. Another test we can do is throw all of this slag in here and cover it up again, just to make sure all that slag is getting to where it needs to go. Round number 2 with the ore. It's kind of a random assortment of things, which makes me think that it is being sorted correctly. So I think we've got some silver in there. It got pulled off. That zinc got pulled off. The aluminum got pulled off. So I think it's working. That was just remnants of earlier construction operations. And we got a bunch of ore coming out the other side here. Well, we need to connect all that up. And actually, this is where it normally goes down in turns. So that seems like a pretty good place to put it. And what's this other belt? Oh, I believe that's the silicon belt. Well, that's a couple less undergrounds if it's the one that goes under. But it will also come from above though, so this will not be the path it takes anymore. And then we have the input from the crystallizers, which actually come from over here. So how about instead it just comes along here and makes it in there. The bus needs to be extended, and this supply is probably in the wrong spot, but we can pick it up and put it probably somewhere over here, which I think will work better. So let's keep the bus lines going. It looks like this train track is in the way, which is problematic, but we can make it smaller by putting the loop right here, although it might not work with the position of that. No, it doesn't. We'll worry about that in a bit. Let's see where the belts actually go and see how much space we have, because we might have more than we think. Some of the stuff was kind of placed a little close to this line here. I probably should have extended this a little further, but a lot of this could be made shorter with just bunches and bunches of speed modules, so it's probably not going to be an issue. Let's see, we need to make sure that this logic signal continues across all of these, because that's what we got to get set up now. So we need to have some logic conditions for every step above the chain. So all you have to do is identify the ore you're trying to control, so crushed crotinium, and then look for all of the crotinium signals and remember what they are. 4, 5, and E. So 4, 5, and E. And they're all running, so that's good. And that looks pretty good. There's probably some signals trying to turn these on, so we don't want to completely connect them yet. But we can do what we can. Well, I just said I don't want to connect it, and then I connected it, but... Well, as long as there's not a green signal, I guess it doesn't matter. So anything that doesn't have green signal can be connected. Okay, that's all of the crushed ores hooked up. Now we got to think about all of the sorting with chunks. So we'll need some sort of sorting warehouse, kind of like the rest of these. Fortunately, probably can't be straight with these. It needs to be a little further up to leave room along this area here for the crystal catalyst to come through. But we can kind of mash this in here. And we got to do the same thing for each type. Oh, that's even worse. Where it still can't line up. So it has to be down here. Well, can't abide by that. It may not be perfectly straight along the whole line, but I'm certainly going to try to keep it straight for at least part of it. And we can kind of make it maybe a little more appealing by doing something like that. So the first controls are always the two input resources, sapphirite and rubite. So sapphirite under 1,000, rubite under 1,000. And then we need to send the condition down, where rubite has to be more than 900, and then we need a signal. Well, it's getting more complicated here, but I think the last signal we used was F. So we'll use G. And then H for rubite chunks. So we got to look at all of the methods of sorting and whether or not this is the most ideal method of using the various resources. Well, as far as sapphirite is concerned, the only thing sapphirite chunks go into is making nickel. So that's the most ideal application of sapphirite, so we don't have to worry about any other controls. And rubite does silicon and nickel, which is over here, so we might as well get it set up. Rubite, ammonium, then we'll make that I and J. So since we're so short on silicon, that is the ideal direction for rubite to go. So less ideal is nickel. So for rubite, besides wanting to fill up the warehouse to 1,000, it also needs to see the I signal. And since it doesn't, because there's nothing in here, it's shut off. Let's say silicon is the ideal application of bobmonium as well, so we won't worry about that. But that gets these set up. So now we can hook stuff up. It won't go anywhere without the catalyst, but that's okay. Then we go down a little further. We've got the next series of things to set up. Let's see if we can copy this general setup and have it work. Mostly, if the belts were removed. So right there, and right there. So we have aluminum, zinc, and silver. It seems like the consumption of aluminum is the highest, so we probably want to give it priority over anything else. Let's see if they share anything. They do share givelite, but it is the only consumer of crotinium, so we can get priority over that. Zinc shares ore with aluminum, which it is secondary to, and bobmonium from silicon. And then silver, stearite and bobmonium Well, this is the only place that stereotype gets used. So that can be a straight shot. Ammonium is used in 2 other places, but I would actually say that silver has higher priority over zinc. And then zinc will have an extra requirement based on this warehouse. So stereotype. O. Ammonium. P. So since we have an additional signal, this P needs to exist. And then it will turn on. So that does it for those guys. So they should all be able to be hooked up now. And there it goes. So ammonium is being held off because it hasn't gotten here. But Juvelite's being held off, and I don't think that it should. Because the outputs of these were not connected. So this stuff's kind of in the way a little bit, but we'll just have to go right over the top of it and keep on going. See, a lot of these warehouses don't have lights next to them. It's not critical that they do, but it would be nice. Then we gotta stitch in the powders, which are right here. They just so happen to be going the wrong way. And this is the only place they go, so they can go straight on in. And there's no on signal, so this should be fine. And now it's just sending all of the chunks down, and these last ones don't need to have a warehouse. They still need logic, but they are easier in the sense where no warehouse is required. This should be pretty good to test. We just need to get these catalysts moved around, and actually might be able to do that fairly easily with a balancing warehouse here. So we can have something just going in there. It looks like these aren't set correctly. This isn't being told to turn on, so we can just kind of hook it up. Let it make some efficient silver. And it stops. And same for zinc. So we can have a little output right there. Making the zinc. And it should stop, which it does. Then aluminum, which based on its level, it should actually turn on for a little while. But it's not. Oh, okay, so it's set to 8. I noticed this has a green signal, but it's not on. Kind of don't want it to be on, but I'm still kind of curious about why it's not running. I see. It got distributed through there. Well, let's unhook this so it won't keep going forever. But it didn't need this. It looks like none of them do. But it just goes up and in. We'll let that belt clear out for a second. Let's see if we can finally end our silicon drought. Oh, these got inserted to the wrong side. They actually needed to be on the outside. Okay, that's not running, but it looks like the wire isn't connected. Let's see if there's any other ones missing wires. Yeah, they seem to have them. So hook that up, and suddenly, 60 silicon a second. Look at that. Have you ever seen a more beautiful sight? But let's hook this in here. And say that we have to have at least 200 in it before it's willing to send it to make the concrete. But otherwise, there we go. Pumping out silicon. But it only goes so far, just like some of these other resources, because they still need to be hooked up to their original lines. Like this one right here is silver and aluminum, which can do a little squiggly there and connect and get sent back to the network. Silicon's got to go a lot farther. It looks like that belt is this one right here. And we no longer need these sample blueprints. Silicon is still being produced at max speed, but looks good to me. Well, aluminum kind of lucked out here because it is directly in front of its belt. Zinc wasn't quite as lucky, but still, it's more or less straight. And same with silver. Now we have a much higher capacity to make these ores than we used to. So if we wanted to smelt way more, we could. But this should be enough. Our factory's been sized around this amount of smelting, and so has the science. So we shouldn't need to upgrade this in the immediate future. We can give it a little bit of time until it's actually too slow for us. But that silicon is going in. Concrete is getting made. Bricks are being produced, picked up, being delivered. And more machines being made. Are there any leftover belts just chilling out? Because we shouldn't have any extras. Every connection should go somewhere. It seems like it does. So we should have some more machines to work with now. And we got lots of modules to put in. So everything should have modules now. Basically seems like it. So silicon production has slowed down. And that is because we are using up all of the catalyst. Is that just a lack of resources thing? Yeah. We might want to set that warehouse to store a lot more. Basically to be almost full. So a lot of these are set to 80 as the dump. But how about let's set this to 60. So it has to be at least 60 before dust is sent down to making crystals. And this will still dump if it gets above 80. So yeah, there's only so much dust available. Which is why we have all this logic. So in the event the ideal methods can't operate, the less ideal ones will. Well, let's hook up the other lines then. It will be less ideal, but this system should self-balance itself over time. Specifically, what I'm thinking about is that doing this will generate more dust. And if it gets overloaded, it'll shut itself down. Another thing we can do is steal some dust from up here and bring it back down. And it looks like it's starting to max out here. Shouldn't these be running? Ah, they don't have any mud. And the mud requests are being made, but it's just not enough. So let's go up there and add in more drones and grab some dust. So there we go. Way more drones. And we'll just let that keep doing its thing. When it clogs up, it clogs up. Meanwhile, look at all this dust we've been collecting in here. I don't know how far that dust is actually going to go, but we'll see what happens. And hey, as it turns out, these things can use productivity modules. But unfortunately, it only has a slot for one, which I think means we won't be producing enough anymore. Yeah. We'll have to give the factory a once-over at some point and check out all those modules, see which machines should use what. But we'll need to give this a little bit of time to equalize. Otherwise, though, I'm pretty happy with the upgrade. It was probably as, let's say, painless as it possibly could have been, considering how much actually did get changed. And I'm happy to see that we have more space to expand further, so we can do another tier of this if we want to. Of course, it will require that all of these machines be shifted up one. That'll be fun. But there's also space here for the next tier of refining, and then now the sorters would be butting up right up here. So the expansion worked. Seems pretty good. So now we should have a stable supply of silicon, eventually anyway, once it catches up, for our blue science. But that's gonna have to wait till next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.